When it comes to the media, it turns out more and more Americans just can't trust it. And we can confirm that now thanks to Rasmussen Reports. Rasmussen asked, do you trust the political news you're getting? 30% said yes, but a whopping 52% said no. 19% said they're not sure. But when it comes to this statement, do you agree or disagree with this statement? The media are truly the enemy of the people, a line coined by Donald Trump. 35% strongly agreed, 24% somewhat agree, so a large majority. 13% somewhat disagree, and only 23% strongly disagree. 5% not sure. Let's welcome in Mark Mitchell, the head pollster at Rasmussen Reports. Mark, thank you for being here. I know we've talked about this before, but I think as we head into a presidential primary season and then a presidential election, this is a really important question to ask because, the media is going to be giving information and a lot of it's going to be biased. So that leads us to another of the great questions you also asked. Does news media coverage of politics generally tend to favor Democrats or Republicans? 52% says Democrats. 20% Republicans, 19%, only 19% said the coverage is neutral and balanced, and another 10% said not sure. So Mark, what this tells me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that even Democrats understand they can't trust the media.
Well, the Democrat numbers have really shifted in a major way. They're the ones that are waking up the most. And as members of the independent media, you and I know how absolutely propaganda a lot of the stuff we see in major corporate media is. But the voters are really waking up because these numbers are record setters in more ways than one. That first question of do you trust the political news you're getting? 30% said yes, 52% said no. That's the widest spread we've ever had. Now, Republicans, only 22% say yes, and only 23% of independents say yes. But Democrats, now only 44% say yes, and that's down from a 55% majority just back in August. So that's a really major shift, and I can only imagine that really the Durham report and these things being uncovered about Biden are some of the reasons that the shift is happening. As for that Trump quote, 59% of American likely voters agreeing with Donald Trump that media is the enemy of the people. That's also a record setter. And 44% of Democrats at least somewhat agree with that statement, and only 51% at least somewhat disagree. Of course, Republicans, 77% agree, and independents, 56 to 35. So I can, as they keep trying to be in the tank, numbers are going to continue to get worse. But at some point, maybe we're just going to hit a wall. And as for just the overt bias that voters see in the media, 52% say it favors the Democrats, only 20% say Republican. Keep in mind that on any given day, if I ask a political question with this methodology and this weighting, I could expect to see a very split result on biased, on divisive issues. But here, the bias is so clear that there's a 32% lead of Democrats over Republicans. We've asked that question before, specifically about whether the media favors Biden or Trump. And recently, even that spread hasn't been as wide as this. And even 39% of Democrats say that the media favors Democrats. Only 21% of Democrats say the media favors Republicans. So they know it. They see it. I think that's one of the reasons that nobody watches cable news networks anymore.
I think that you all should personally flag this poll, especially the question, do you see the media as the enemy of the people for Jim Acosta? Because I think he'll die a little inside. Every time that Trump said that statement, he literally almost cried. And this wasn't actually theatrical Jim, because there's theatrical Jim who does things for TV. And then there's real Jim, but this actually bothered real Jim. I might have to send it to him just with a little nice letter and a gift basket and say, enemy, because remember he had that book and it flopped. But on to other topics. Speaking of being in the tank, the media is clearly in the tank for George Soros. So Ron Coleman sponsored this poll by you all, where you simply asked what were their impressions, American people, of George Soros. Only 10% said favorable, despite, the corporate media covered for him, which is surprising. 14% said somewhat favorable. 12% said somewhat unfavorable. 39% said very unfavorable, and 25% not sure. You've also asked, have donations from George Soros had a positive or negative influence on American politics? Only 13% said very positive, 16% said somewhat positive, 10% said somewhat negative, 39% said very negative, and 22% said not sure. Then you also asked another great question by asking, do you agree or disagree with this statement? Question being the statement being George Soros wants to erode the very fabric of civilization. Soros hates humanity. 35% strongly agreed, 12% somewhat agreed, 9% somewhat disagreed, 21% strongly disagreed, 23% said not sure. First off, Mark, and you can get into the context of what these numbers mean, but did most people you find even know who George Soros is? Is he a household name?
That was the biggest takeaway for me, is that we in the media clearly know who George Soros is, but a lot of voters, the signal here tells me that a lot of voters really are up in the air. There was a 25% not sure rating on his favorability. And specifically what I found was interesting is that varied by party. So only 18% of Republicans were not sure, but 28% of Democrats and 30% of independents. So you say that the media is in the tank for George Soros. I think clearly one of the ways that they're in the tank is by not covering him. Now, it has to be said that despite his low level of not sures, these are absolutely horrifying favorability ratings, even despite the fact that some people who don't know who George Soros is will give a favorable result instead of saying not sure. So that's kind of buoying him a little bit. But even corrected by removing the not sures, he's basically got about 1/3 of the U.S. electorate having a favorable opinion and 2/3 having an unfavorable opinion. But also a thread running through this was the fact that even though George Soros objectively, benefits Democrats with his donations, Democrats' approval rating of him isn't that high. I mean, it's a ghastly low among Republicans and independents. And really, the benchmark I've been using for a low approval rating is Mitch McConnell among Republicans. And believe it or not, even though his very favorable rating ties George Soros among Republicans, his overall favorability rating is a few points lower. But among Democrats, it's 37% to 35%. So he's roughly split. Have donations from George Soros had a positive or negative influence on American politics? Democrats, 44% say positive and 31% say negative. And I guarantee you that a good amount of those people saying positive just like the fact that a billionaire is giving money away, right? And then again, just this overwhelmingly. So that was the news hook that drove all of this. We did this because we always like to push the envelope of what you're allowed to ask as a pollster. But Elon Musk made a really hot take quote on Twitter about George Soros, and it really got the world buzzing about him. 48% of voters agree with Elon Musk, only 30% disagree. Corrected for the not sures, it's 62%. So 62% of U.S. likely voters agree that George Soros hates humanity and wants to erode the very fabric of civilization. And for people who have been following our Rasmussen numbers, that 62% number will be very familiar because that's the level of wokenness people have achieved as far as the power structures of government. Roughly 62% of people think that Joe Biden is profiting from pay-to-play schemes. Roughly 62% of people think that January 6th was a Fedsurrection. Roughly 60% of people think that the FBI has been politically weaponized. And it's almost becoming predictable if I ask a question like this. So now we just have to figure out more taboo questions to ask. But it's funny you brought up Jim Acosta.
We can come up with some questions like that. You know we can.
Yeah.
You know what I do notice from the polls, from these polls, and the ones we consistently talk about, is that there's a direct correlation between the trust in media and people waking up to maybe the Biden family's business deals, the Fedsurrection, and all those other topics. You see those numbers really match up. Thank you so much, Mark Mitchell. Always enlightening.
My pleasure.